The launch of ChatGPT in November 2022 catapulted artificial intelligence into the mainstream.
ChatGPT reaches 100 million users in 2 months.
Is this the fastest growing consumer application in history?
Banks deploy fleets of AI agents that work around the clock.
Morgan Stanley launches AI assistant powered
Will
by
AI replace your financial advisor?
In less than 4 years, the world has shifted in a way no one could have predicted. And even now, it's hard to know where to focus. What's hype? What's real? What's next? The pace hasn't slowed. If anything, it's accelerating.
Some have embraced AI with open arms, bright-eyed about the possibilities, the efficiency gains, the competitive edge. Others are more wary, cautious about what could get lost, who could get left behind, and whether we're moving faster than we can steer.
In this episode of Fintech Files from BCG Platinion, we examine what AI really means for financial services, for the institutions racing to deploy it, for the workers whose roles are being rewritten, and for everyone trying to make sense of a system that's changing faster than anyone predicted.
In the months after ChatGPT launched, a kind of collective reckoning swept through the industry.
Executives who had spent years talking about digital transformation were suddenly watching their junior analysts draft entire reports in minutes.
The mood was electric and uneasy.
Can you maybe describe the moment for you? Like, how was it when it launched? Where were you? And what was also the reaction in the rooms you were in, both like from a government perspective and also from the institutions you were advising?
Yeah, so I remember the moment quite well because it was a pretty stressful time for me as I was literally just in the final stretches of negotiating the European AI Act. I think the final vote was about 3 weeks out. So it was a very fateful moment for Europe and its AI regulation. And then suddenly someone said, oh, have you tried this AI thing that can actually create pictures in seconds? And I was like, well, that sounds really interesting. I can use a few pictures for a presentation. I tried it, but I remember thinking, okay, this is going to cause trouble.
That's Kirsten Rulf. She's a partner and associate director at BCG. Before that, she spent years as senior digital policy advisor to 2 German chancellors, Angela Merkel and Olaf Scholz. She was part of the team actively shaping the European AI Act.
It was definitely a fateful moment because, at that point, you cannot change an entire EU regulation. We thought about this as a continent for 4 years, and it definitely was too late to change anything in the regulation, but it definitely has caused, let's not just say trouble, let's say uproar, and quite a revolution.
That uproar hit boardrooms almost immediately. According to BCG's AI radar research, 3/4 of executives now rank AI as top 3 strategic priority.
Investment is projected to increase 60% over the next 3 years. 1 in 3 companies are planning to spend more than $25 million on AI this year alone.
But there's a gap between ambition and reality. Only 1 in 4 executives say they're actually seeing significant value from those investments.
What would you say are the conversations happening in the boardrooms right now around AI, specifically maybe focused on risk and compliance?
Yeah, so I think actually risk and compliance wasn't so much in the boardroom at the beginning of this. It was much more, okay, are we missing the train? Has the train left the station for our company? Should we do more? Should we invest more in AI tools, in AI adoption, in training and upskilling our employees? And how can we really use this for efficiency gains? And now I think that everybody has experimented with AI and the ROI isn't automatically transpiring. And it's still sort of a fight to actually make AI a tool that can help businesses really create value. and not just save a couple of minutes here and there. I think now, not just risk and compliance, but really the broader questions on change management have entered the boardroom big time. It is a topic that I talk about on a daily basis.
But the changes aren't just happening at the strategic level. They're reshaping how teams actually work together in ways that even the people leading those teams did not anticipate.
What does AI integration into teams actually look like right now?
Yeah, I think that's pretty tough. I think a lot of my government colleagues ask me about that. Do you have a digital twin? Do you still work by yourself? Is it actually still you that's talking to us on the phone, etc.? Or are you well ahead there? And should we actually clone the chancellor or whatever? I think it's fun to talk about, but it's also really scary at the same time. And I find that leadership changes when you have an AI colleague in your team. I think the dynamic really changes when I work with younger colleagues. I see it all the time. While, yes, they are fascinated by that colleague, and sometimes even they can become quite rigid with him. Hierarchy works there also between the humans and the AI. At the same time, of course, sometimes they ask my custom GPT before they ask me. And for me, that is convenient. But at the same time, as a human, it always makes me feel a little bit obsolete. And I think there's entirely new leadership challenges and team dynamics that we're exploring here and that sometimes we're not very conscious about.
Feeling obsolete. It's a fear that's been simmering since the day ChatGPT launched. The worry that the thing you've spent years learning to do might suddenly be done faster, cheaper, by something that never sleeps.
So much of the AI conversation has focused on productivity. How much faster can we move? How many tasks can we automate?
The concern for me is that we have been looking into this either from a fear perspective, like people are going to lose their jobs, so how do I pay my bills? Or people paying, especially, on the corporate space or at the national governance space, looking into this purely from a productivity gain perspective or how many less people we can hire basically going forward. But I felt that there is a gap in the conversation, which is for me is very fundamental, which is as people lose their jobs, yes, money is going to be an issue, cost is going to be an aspect, but what does it mean for most of us who've established or defined their identity over the years about what they do and how they work?
That's Dr. Akram Awad. He's a managing director and partner at BCG. He leads the firm Global Work on Smart Cities and advises governments across all the Middle East on AI strategy.
He also gave a TED Talk with a title that cuts right through the heart of the matter. Will AI make humans useless?
Can you maybe explain a bit to our listeners what drove you to ask this question and also what's at stake if we don't answer it?
I think what mainly brought that specific kind of tension point for me was working on national strategies. When we talk about national strategies, nations tend to talk about tracing. It's an AI race. Who's going to be first there? And there is a big focus there on economic impact, like how can we increase the productivity of the nation? How can we reduce the cost of the government or, the national assets? So there's always this element of how can we get rid of cost? And unfortunately, the human element would typically be the victim of these discussions. It almost always translates to, can we do this with less people? And of course, that comes at a time when, with the advancement of generative AI over the past 3 or 4 years, this became by itself a key topic. Is AI going to take over a lot of jobs? And that's why I wanted to make sure that we shift the narrative or the question from, will AI make us useless, to what do we choose to become in a world where we don't have to work? Because I truly believe that we can really get at some point to a world where job becomes optional and where technology is going to enable us to live and thrive as humans without necessarily having all of us having to work in the future.
To make that question concrete, Akram painted a picture of what this shift looks like on the ground, in a job that millions of people do every day.
Let me maybe take a good example here of someone who built a career in banking, in mortgage advisories, making decisions on credit, approving or rejecting applications, and so on. And if you look into the current progress of AI, a lot of these tasks can be 100% automated and can be basically done in a matter of seconds. So this person will have two options, either to take a step back and chill and assume that their skill is quite irrelevant now and they either need to shift to a very different career or do nothing, or they can think about their experience as humans combined with this technical expertise, probably the most relevant, to keep that human touch to whatever AI is going to do going forward. Because there is a world in which, we completely automate this and everyone starts receiving these automated emails or messages about their mortgage application being rejected or some fees being assigned or a very cold reminder of paying the installments on the bank for a mortgage or a loan and so on. Or you would have that kind of heavy part being done by AI, but the human there is still going to be the one that bridges between the algorithm and the human counterpart, which is in this case the customer or the client, by being the bridge that explains, by being the bridge that sometimes even need to look in person in detail on a specific context before a final decision is made on the approval or rejection of a mortgage, rather than making this purely a mechanical and algorithm exercise.
That phrase, the bridge between the algorithm and the customer, captures something important. Most roles are not disappearing. They're evolving.
And there's another shift happening too, one that's less about how work changes and more about who gets access. For decades, quality financial advice was reserved for the wealthy. What happens when AI changes that?
One key topic here is also how AI is democratizing financial advice. For instance, everyone will have their own personal AI advisor. Do you think that's actually happening, or is it just something that people are still dreaming of?
I think it's going to be a journey. So we moved from a world where advisory was something that was limited to specific people or skilled people who just understood the complexity of the financial sector. Because if you look, for example, into a lot of offering, like where do I invest my money? Where do I hedge some of the risks? Some of it is not just sophisticated, but is too complex. And there is just a variety of options out there for people to make the right decision if they're not specialized in this area. Historically, that knowledge was limited either to certain financial institutions like banks or specialized financial advisory firms. Now, at some point, there was a scale issue, and this is where a lot of the financial institutions started looking into options to scale that. And at the time, AI actually came to save them, automating some of the elements, reviewing profiles, measuring the risk profile, or kind of prioritizing the options. But that was kind of an asset that was still technical enough that it would still be contained within the financial institutions or those who are specialized in the field. And we started seeing AI advisors as kind of an extension of the advisory services of those institutes, again, like banks and so on. I think where things are going to evolve in the next few years are two aspects. First, with the expansion of open banking, a lot of this data and information, which historically has been limited to the likes of banks, will become accessible to a broader ecosystem of fintech innovators who will be able to come up with kind of new ways to provide this advice and financial literacy to the public. So I think there would be first a transition phase where actually there would be a new, more balanced and more neutral segment of startups that focusing on financial advisory and financial literacy. And this is going to be kind of bring a first level of democratization. You are detaching a lot of that advice and knowledge away from the core institutions. Now, I think over the years, this might evolve further, that each of us are simply just going to have their own financial advisor, that either you're going to build yourself or someone is going to build it and open access it to everyone.
That future is already taking shape, sometimes in unexpected places.
I was talking to a son of a friend the other day who's still in their school years and who's already working on his startup. And the idea there is to create an education platform to basically bring gamification into the learning journey of children. And at the heart of it was actually behavioral learnings, but actually financial literacy. So they wanted to create kind of the equivalent of, think about it, I'm old enough to remember a game called Sims. And I'm not sure how popular it is right now, but actually, bring a simplified version of that for children where they earn virtual money from doing tasks related to their school. Like, I've done my homework, I've memorized something, and then provide them with options of how they're actually going to spend this money as part of the game. And this is the difference between, okay, shall I spend it on buying material stuff like a new car in the virtual space? Shall I spend it on real estate? Shall I spend it on stocks? Shall I put it somewhere else? So bringing that financial literacy using AI with a huge personalization, which shows that first, this is top of mind for the new generation, learning basically about how they manage their finances, show the power of having basically of how AI itself can play a key role in kind of bringing a new wave of financial advisory and literacy. And I think, for example, something would be quite relevant, but it shows also how we can get to a future where businesses also become less about just making money and fulfilling a value. And in this case, is literally bringing financial literacy. I wanted to start with that example because that's unique kind of answer. You're talking about now kids who are with the power of AI can create whole platforms, whole games, basically, with a mission.
Stories like that, a school kid building a fintech platform from scratch, show what's possible when the tools are accessible.
For the teams that have embraced AI, it's unlocked capacity. Not just to do more, but to focus on what actually requires a human.
I love it when all the noise is being taken away by AI. I love it when we can really focus on the problems that we actually want to discuss and not on the small nitty-gritty that can just be done before, because it really makes you focus on, okay, what do I have to add to that? That's not noise. Where can I really stretch myself beyond the obvious? And I think it makes the work better. I enjoy it. I try to convey to younger colleagues that it wasn't always like that. You still need to think by yourself, right? But I also really like that we can have truly profound conversations, because all of the brainstorming can really happen on another basis and from another sort of point where you can jump off at a much higher level.
But getting to that point requires something the industry is still figuring out: how to have honest, grounded conversations about what AI can do and cannot do.
We need to acknowledge that we as humans are always a bit behind, that it takes a long time for the upsides and downsides of AI to really sift through society and come into the conversation, and for us to really grasp what the actual problem is. So a lot of these discussions are very vague. They're all about, oh, either AI is really good or AI is really bad. But the kind of nuanced, really focused discussion of what are the actual risks for whom, who needs to tackle them, and what can actually be done, both on a technical layer, but also on a more process governance layer. Who are the right people to come together and think about this? And what can we actually really do without cutting all the progress, but at the same time not delivering very vulnerable people to just their fate? I think those kinds of questions, they were on the horizons, but it's taken me by surprise how long it took us to really get to these questions and to really get serious about, okay, this is a world where AI will be widespread. It will transform businesses, it will transform governments, it will transform the education sector, the health sector, and our societies. And how can we really have an honest and open and nuanced conversations about them that is actionable? One of the things that I would love to see is behavioral science coming a bit more closer to AI and the human in the loop discussion, because there's so many similarities when it comes to how to team up well with an AI and behavioral science. So I think I would love to see that. I look a lot at what Priya Parker writes about creating community. And I think about how can I create a community with someone that isn't actually human, in a human community.
AI adoption is accelerating. The technology continues to evolve. And like it or not, it is here to stay. For Akram, the question is not whether to adapt, it's how. And that starts with rethinking the roles people play.
In his TED Talk, he introduces the framework he calls the gap circles: guardians, adapters, and pioneers.
I introduced what I call the gap circles, which is for me a view of how the different human roles are likely to shape and concentrate as AI starts playing a more dominant role in doing things on our behalf or for us. First is the guardians, and these are real roles that are going to focus on our protection, our survival as humans. On the other hand, you have the pioneers, and these are basically the innovators who will continue to push the boundaries of innovation and kind of in a broader context, exploring what lies behind our current understanding of the world and the universe. Everyone else, and that's going to be my view, that the bigger circle that is likely to grow over time is the adapters. And those are, those of us who will not need to work anymore, but they still need to find meaning in their lives through doing other things. There is a self-discovery element that needs to happen. And frankly, today, we don't have a lot of that happening in our communities. That push that everyone should really be spending significant time to self-discover.
It's been less than 4 years since ChatGPT launched. In that time, we've gone from chatbots to co-pilots to agents, from novelty to infrastructure.
What started as a tool for drafting emails and creating images for decks is now being asked to reason, to plan, to act.
If you had to bet, 5 years from now, will AI in financial services have been more transformative or more incremental than today's headlines suggest?
Oh, absolutely transformative. I think we will not recognize the financial system and banks 5 years from now. I also think there will be a lot of banks that will be gone. So to be fair, I think there will be a lot of AI-only banks in the future. If I can dream about maybe not 5 years from now, but 10 years from now, I think we will have banks that run entirely on agents and very, very few people. I think that we will also really need to rethink our guardrails for the financial system, because the systemic risks of AI are significant, and there's only now an emerging discussion in the IMF, in the World Bank, in the central bank community on what are these risks and how can they be tackled. So I think we will also see a big implosion of AI in the financial system in between. But then for sure, it will be one of the sectors that is most transformed by AI. And I'm actually looking forward to it, because I think it will, on a grander scale and taking a step back from a global perspective, help us bank the unbanked, help us bring a lot of fairness into the financial sector, and really help us also to create a lot of value.
We've talked about how AI is changing banks, jobs, and access to financial advice. So where does Akram see all of this heading?
One of the most disruptive technologies, in my view, for financial services is blockchain. Because blockchain, in a way, replaces the core of what the whole financial sector stands for, which is trust. Because blockchain basically says, I don't need to trust a middleman. When there's a whole industry that is built on the foundation of, you can trust me with your money and with your financial decisions. Now, that is good in many ways. It brings kind of a new wave of innovation to the sector, but it also puts meaningful pressure on these institutions, including the financial service, to think about what makes a bank basically relevant for its customers. It's not about the technology. It's not even about the trust in the traditional technical way of it. It's something more relevant that would make basically a bank more meaningful and better connected with its customers. And I think only those institutes that can go back to the basics. It puts pressure on everyone to take a step back, think about their purpose and why they exist. And at the heart of it is bringing that meaning and value to us as humans and, of course, to the world overall.
This has been Fintech Files from BCG Platinion.
This season, we're digging deep into the groundbreaking ideas that are reshaping the future of fintech. We've got some amazing guests lined up, so make sure you're subscribed and you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.